those are kind of the obvious questions, right? What are the business questions that you want to answer? And really, you need to get started in these two areas, kind of agnostic to technology. It's really more about, hey, what are you trying to achieve? Let's really get this in the mind of the end user that you're going to be supporting this for, with that question you're setting out to answer. So that way, anything you map from with the business model to the data, what are your measures, facts, and dimensions, that's getting into that semantic layer. And then when you actually get into creating something, are you creating something of value that is returning back and always referenceable to a specific question, role, and workflow of a given organization? Like, what is my top 10 customers I need to focus on today because I'm a sales rep and I'm in mobile Power BI? Those types of things help shape then what you develop, and then what you need from your solution footprint, all the data you're collecting as an organization in order to be effective in the data storytelling. So this is a nice framework, and I'll tell you, look, you'll have this PowerPoint. We use this at Arbella as a part of our process actually for deploying. And a lot of people like this. They always come back to this because it just puts it into nice categories with how you need to focus, and then from that focus, be able to execute, and then do so in a very iterative fashion. So that's what that's about. Getting back again a little bit, revisiting data story basics. So again, this is just the first part here. So looking at this, when you start to break down a question, so you have a question, you start to break that apart and say, what is this? Is it a comparison? Most, probably 60% of the questions you're going to start with in a descriptive layer, what, when, why, what took place. 60% of the time it's going to be in that top level comparison for the majority of things. And then you can see how this breaks apart with helping you define the characters, and then finally the right visualization even to pick when you're going to help tell an effective data story. So, is it a comparison over time with many periods and cyclical data? Well, then that lands you into that cluster area chart, versus few periods with many categories lands you in a line chart at the top right. Again, this is just a guide to be able to help you out. Stephen Few, this is actually one of the few people, no pun intended, to be able to follow that really focuses on this in an agnostic way, not technology specific, is Stephen Few. So his design books are just really critical as far as like helping you do this work. So this is just from him. And then looking at this, one of the things, one of my favorite words, especially from trivia fans, if you've never heard of it, skeuomorphism. So skeuomorphism is something that we seek to avoid in our visual data storytelling. It's all about being able to let the data tell a story effectively versus trying to make it really pretty with a bunch of art that takes away from the eyes and adds little value. It's kind of what skeuomorphism is in terms of it's redundant ink or non-data ink. That's kind of what basis of skeuomorphism is when it comes to data storytelling with things like Power BI. These are some bad examples, right? These are some bad examples from Edward Tufte. So another name there, Edward Tufte is his name, and we can make sure that's a part of the notes as well. But this is called chart jump, right? So left, bottom, there's no way in the world you can make anything out of that as far as the categories they try to split with these column chart as far as adding value and telling an effective story. Same thing, picking on Microsoft. This is from like MSDN magazine. So in the middle there, so the platform momentum. When you look at this, obviously .NET's better than Java and SQL Server is better than Oracle and IBM by quick eye glance. But that's all you can really do with this is quick eye glance. There's so much busyness in the background that if you were really trying to tell an effective data story with this, the data would be more prominent than all the visuals that they're trying to hop it up with. And then the final piece, this is called the duck chart on the right-hand side. It's called the duck chart because that's kind of what it looks like, and I have no idea what it's trying to tell you other than it's really ugly. And that's a great example of what not to do, right? So we'll just keep going from there. So part one review. So what we did in part one, so you got the basics, right? And the basics is trying to help you break this apart into manageable chunks. The goals of that basics, again, is to just give you a framework in which to say, hey, we've got these 706 Excel reports in our old reporting system. And now we're going to focus on sales instead of like trying to do everything at once. And then focusing in on sales, 200 of those Excel reports are from sales. And it really comes down to those 200 reports are really pulling from 3 unique data sets, or maybe 2, or maybe even 1. But the point is to be able to break that part when you get that, known, break that apart into a manageable chunk to say, now, instead of focusing on reports, what questions are you trying to answer to be successful, mobile sales rep or regional sales manager in a given day, in a given week? Just start there. Get that up and running, get that trusted, and get that adopted. And those two key words being adopted, user adoption, and trust are the two major reasons why BI projects fail commonly. And this is from Forrester and Gartner and so forth as far as their research. And so that's going back to that again. So two reasons why they fail: user adoption and trust. And so that's why that whole framework at the beginning is meant to help you establish a way, no matter really what technology you're using, to be honest with you, but establish a way in which you can break it apart that's meaningful to the end user, that has a set of business questions that tie to technical work. And that's the biggest part of that. So then what we got into from part one from the advanced data storytelling, you see the 4 things here. So, enabling drill through capability. So this is drill through and not drill out, but this is drill down as well as click through kinds of things, right? So then we have this as far as the bottom piece. Then you have the what if analysis. So again, that's a new feature. Power BI came out late last year. And then the what if analysis and what if types of metrics. And then the quick insights. So using machine learning and starting that conversation layer a little bit with the quick insights from Power BI. So this is all, again, just resources. We have the videos for those, and we can also revisit those after we're done with the major section here, moving to Power BI. So with that, I'm going to move into more of the Power BI side of things. I promised you it's not PowerPoint, death by PowerPoint, and we were sitting at 10 minutes and doing that. So hopefully everybody's with me and ready to get into more action here with this. So as we look at this from bookmarks and storytelling, right? So bookmarks is a new concept that exists inside Power BI. Now it has to be turned on. So what I'm going to go to is I'm going to go to a Power BI file that I have. This is the name of the Power BI file. This is what I've used in the previous data storytelling webinar session. So this will look familiar to anybody that was on that previous one. So when we go and look at this, you have to turn on this feature. So I'm going to File, I'm going to go into Options. Once the Options loads. It's taking a little bit today. I don't know what's up with my, but anyway, I'm going to go to Preview Features and Bookmarks. So now Bookmarks is clicked, checked. I've already got it on here, right? So I've got it turned on. So that's okay. And then you can also click on the Learn More just to show you. Obviously, this is going to launch into, if I clicked on this left clicked on this, launch into the home page for Bookmarks. But now this is in place. Then we just need to publish this. So I'm going to File, Publish. And this is going to take just a second. It's actually signed me out, so bear with me. And it looks like Power BI is crashing on me right now. So it wouldn't be a demo without it crashing, of course. Let me close down a few windows. Bear with me, sorry.
That's always the way it works on the live demo, right?
I had everything preloaded for this, and then so just to try to speed it along. So just
too prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, too prepared. I had too much memory taken up, I guess. I don't know. I knew too much at once. So this is loading, and so again, going back, I enabled the options for Power BI for bookmarks. So again, that was File, Options, Preview Features, and you just have to make sure that check mark of bookmarks is enabled. And there's some recent posts about this too with bookmarks, like using it to create an app experience. And again, we can look at that for posting and so forth. But let me just make sure this is all in place. Let me sign in. So this is just my Arbella home for Power BI. So you're going to see a lot more other demo types of things that we published to here. Said it signed in, so now let's try this again. We're going to publish round 2. Clicked on the publish button. I'm going to select my work group. So obviously I have to have access rights to this work group to be able to publish and make edits and changes. So I'm clicking select here. I'm just going to click yes because obviously I've already got the existing data set. So I just click replace it because I'm making this change here. Then as soon as this gets done publishing, we're going to go to the web version and look at using bookmarks and being able to create them. You can change different settings about them. So they're enabled, and then once enabled, you can add multiple versions, and you can pre-filter, so you can change. And the whole point of bookmarks is in that comparison. So if we look back while this is loading, okay, it says it's got it. But if we look back real quick at this, and we go back to our, breaking a question apart, and we're looking at this. This is like a property management company. They're wanting to compare multiple customers and very specific information. So when you look at this, there's going to be a few different of these visuals that tell a story of answering a few different questions. But then also this is a comparison as far as what the bookmark is enabling, right? So that's the whole point of bookmarking, is I can select different filters and then have those different filters used in a compare and then look at those. And so I'm going to go there now. So I'm in Power BI Web, so that's what's just loaded up here. I'm already in my work group, so my work group is Power BI Demo. Just gonna minimize this here. And so what I've got launched is this report. So this is what I just published to. And I know I published it because I made this page 1 that we'll come back to a little bit later. That's blank on purpose. So. But now I'm going to go into edit report mode here. And then with my edit report, my bookmark is not showing up. Oh my gosh, give me 1 second. My computer is messing up again. I'm sorry about this, guys. Give me 1 second here. I don't know, I've got to get this. I'm trying to see why I may have to restart this Power BI. Give me 1 second. Okay, so, all right, can you see my screen again?
Not yet.
Tell me when you can see my screen again.
Now we can.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
So, I had to restart this guy, and I just wanted to make sure I got the right version here. So the second step that I left out with this too, after I had to restart this, is enabling the bookmarks. So the view pane, bookmarks pane, and then you've got selection pane. So I'm in Power BI still, Power BI file. So just to restart, I'm in the Power BI file, and I had to go back to the views pane after previews were enabled, and the bookmarks pane and selections pane. Selection is after we can add bookmarks, right? So we can create these bookmarks and have different filters again. So I'm going to create a bookmark and call this, rename here. So Property Insights 1, right? And so that view, now I can view just this Property Insights 1 as this value. Now let me go back, exit this view. Now I'm going to take and make a change here to, this is a what if analysis, using the what if analysis parameter from the previous series that we did in this. I want to change this to have a big change here, just so we can see that there is a big difference here, and we can see that the 1900 was the highest value. So so we have that. I'm going to add a new bookmark now. Rename this Property Insights 2. And now I'm looking at this. I'm in view mode, Property Insights 1, Property Insights 2. Now, this allows somebody, so now we can publish this because we've got the bookmark section and selection pane. You can actually add an order to the selection pane as well, or you don't have to have that open. But the biggest piece is you have to turn the preview on in the options. You have to go to the view tab, turn bookmarks pane on, and then from this you can enable people and you can train them. Again, this is a comparison so that I can have multiple versions, and you can think the next storyline that comes with this is that if you get down to budgeting and forecasting need, and you're getting to where you can actually do right back now with Power BI. That's a little, we can do that in another continuation of the series. But you can imagine then a workflow of enabling somebody to be able to write back and have different versions of what they're looking with and playing with for forecast and budget, and then be able to take that from a workflow perspective to the next step with it. So the whole point of bookmarks with telling that, more data storytelling is we're trying to enable, now that we have some base level things with some descriptive insights, telling specific stories about, in this example, market value versus current rent, available current rent versus new rent. That's what I was adjusting in this what if analysis. And now we can easily enable the back and forth for the bookmarks. So I'm going to hit save and not try to publish this time because I don't want to have the same kind of crash if I can avoid that for Power BI here. So I'm going to move on to the next section. So with that, just looking at this, we enabled bookmarks. It's still in preview mode. This is a resource that will walk you from end to end, what is possible with it. And again, to try to enable the comparison story, and if these type of workflows of people working with financial statements, sales insights, they want to look at different versions. They want to compare region to region for their sales insights. I mean, that's a great way to be able to enable bookmarking so they can do that. So they don't have to, go and try to save this or save something else to make changes. I mean, it's a quick way to enable that type of scenario. So moving into the next type of scenario, adding conversation, and this is a big topic that I think a lot of people don't. I guess there's a lot of information out there about natural query languaging, and then Cortana analytics, and then like using and questioning your data in this conversation layer. And again, I even mentioned bots, and we can talk about that at the end about that, how to extend this. But this is about like how can you get started with that, because there are a few features that enable this adding conversation type of concepts. And if you look at like the millennial type of workforce person, or as people are starting to get used to the natural user interfaces, and then they're moving more into their mobile experiences, being able to ask questions of their data is super important. And you can help shape that experience, right? You shape that experience with not only the data set that you have, but also in looking at this, and that means the semantics. Again, that's super important, what are questions you're answering. And so being able to preempt those types of questions, right? So the whole point of this is they may ask things in a little bit different way related to their metrics and dimensions. And so let's just look at this, for example. I've got two resources here. One, it's just tips and for asking questions in Power BI Q&A. So how to get that started. And then two, enabling Cortana in Power BI. So enabling Cortana, what this means is when I say Cortana, I mean this, meaning that Cortana is able to tie into your organization. So Power BI, you can enable this service, and you can design specific reports, and you can see the preview for this here. You can design specific reports for these Cortana pages that are meant to be quick hit information. Again, if you think about the types of questions that are trying to be asked, this would be the same types of questions that could lead somebody, if they're on a Windows 10 type of device like I would be here, and ask that question. Or if I'm inside Power BI, or if I'm actually on the Power BI web service. And so we're going to look at all those together. So let's start inside Power BI first, and really where you really see this showing up initially. So I'm just going to, everything's kind of collapsed here as much as I can. So looking at this, so you should see, depending on what version of Power BI you have up and loaded, actually. Let me get out of exit mode for that bookmark. Let me just close out my bookmarks for now. So what you should see is ask a question, right? So I've got this blank page. I can't speak here. What's going on? So I ask a question. It's as simple as this right now inside Power BI desktop, and this is the designer experience. Now imagine, and I can understand, like somebody who knows data, somebody who knows Excel, like, you're used to working with the relationship tab and, importing and doing VLOOKUPs, and, you're used to working at that data layer. But if you can start to shape, like, your designs, if you have the data surface correctly for you with these types of questions, and then then go to the best design guidelines for visuals, you'll always have these questions to start from when you do anything new, right? Obviously, it's harder to go back. You can maybe take a data set that's existing and kind of start adding that. It's just a new way of thinking about it, right? So I guess that's my point. So if we look at this, so what is top property name by current rent? Now, obviously, I knew that because I know the data. And so I knew the question at the top to make this a little bit faster. You see how the query language is picking this up though, right? So and I knew the top property name, like I couldn't end at property. And then it gave me my top, and top one, that's the east property. And then went ahead and put it into a bar chart, because honestly, Power BI is not that great and will probably never be able to just give you the right visual that you should have based on the question. Maybe in a few years, I don't know. But ultimately, you can see how this starts to take shape, so that if you can see, like, these are the questions somebody are answering, and you have your data set, start there. See what you have. It's a great discovery session, but it's also a great way for enabling power users, right? So someone who's not maybe a Power BI developer, but at least wants to add some things to an existing data set. Again, another way to engage with this is here. So I'm starting inside the Power BI desktop. So I asked this, I'm just going to do it as that. It will stay with me. Obviously, so the question kind of stays with you as you move the visual. And then once I'm done with that, and then that's the end of it, really. And if I go ask another question, it's not like it picks it up. So, once it's done, like once I'm done with that question, this visual now is in my hands to do what I should do with it, right? So I'm just going to rename this data questions. And actually, I'll be honest with you, I call it data questions. I used to call this data discovery tab, because there's a lot of times when you start initially with like a data set, and you're looking at a data set as far as like answering questions or specific business needs around sales or finance or whatever it may be. You'll start with like tables and just validating, like, hey, we're getting numbers that we're supposed to get, right? Because you're doing the test. And so that's why this is a little bit different. The data questions is a little bit different than like a data discovery tab that you may already take advantage of. So with that, I'm just going to save this. I'm not going to publish again. I'm just going to go back to Power BI service so that we will not crash this out for you. And so if we come in here, so we're back into the already published version of this, really. So the next thing is, so you can see I have the same kind of concept, right? So I'm in edit mode. So let's just go and start from the scratch. Usually when you go into a Power BI report, which is what I'm in, so I'm in a work group, I'm in a Power BI report. You usually see it in this type of fashion. Whatever it was saved with will be the tab that it starts from. Now I can obviously start, engaging with this. But if I have the ability and rights to be able to do so, I can go in and edit the report. And then from that, again, the same type of scenario starts to exist, right? With being able to have this, ask a question type of mentality. And so I did it here. I did it on the over this, obviously, so it's going to be a little cluttered. So just to show you, it's the same type of concept. What is top property name by current rent? Right, so there. I had the rights to do this, so again, now the question's gone because I'm done with my visual and I can do whatever I'm supposed to with changing that. But that was because I was in edit mode for this, or reading mode. So again, somebody who is a Power BI type of power user mode, right? That would have the rights to do this and kind of shape the stories after that semantic model is in place. Then you'll be able to, I'm going to click down there. Then you'll be able to look at this. So the next thing too, is if you look at this from like a CRM type of information that we've published, I've not created a dashboard yet, but this dashboard is from that report. So just for, I'm assuming there's some level of basics where people understand already that data sets, reports are what you create in Power BI desktop, and then once published, then you start crafting these dashboards. And in these dashboards, so this is the more feature set QA. So you can ask the same question, you know, what is my top property name by current rent? And it will not see, it's not correcting me for spelling, so I had to kind of pay attention here. So now I can pin this to my dashboard, right? So I'm more at the dashboard level than having the to be able to do this. But as far as like asking questions and like versions of the dashboard that are mine, maybe that I'm posing these questions to. And another great thing or related to this is, you know, you can actually pre-build some of these questions. So if you go into your data set once published, I'm going to go to the settings here. So I clicked on the little ellipse button beside the data set for the report. I'm going to go into my settings. My brain is leaving me right now. Just go here. It'll take me in there. And then you see the QA and the features question set here, right? So if I look at this, Q&A in Cortana, well, this is coming up next, so we'll look at that. And so we click apply here, and that's going to enable our Cortana data set. But then the next thing I wanted to show you here is related to these feature questions. So feature questions show, as it says, suggestions for this data set Q&A, right? So I can add a question, right? So what is my top property name by current rent? Now notice it doesn't have the top ahead. So the top ahead is not like they're helping me with my data model. So I have to know property name and current rent out of the semantic model are actually valid, right? That they're actually valid dimension and measures that I want to tell something from. So if I go back to what I just experienced and going into that dashboard again, so I'm in that work group dashboard that was made from the report. And we go back to ask a question, right? So it should pop up here. But yeah, so it should pop up right here. It's not popping up. So again, this is a demo, but it will pop up once it syncs. It takes a little bit of time sometimes, but that's tied to that data set. Anyway, so that's relatable, or so that's the first part of this with, you know, you look at this and adding conversations, right? So starting in Power BI, starting to think about this, and this is starting to tie back to that whole process of how that define and create. What are the business questions? Type them out, you know, have them ready, and actually have them ready to be put into that data set. They should be able to be answered by that data set, and it'll help drive and keep to where the whole point of it goes back to user adoption and trust. If you're validating against with those end users that you are answering the questions they desire and they're involved in the iterative process, not only do they trust it, they love it, they adopt it super fast, and you're able to move in an iterative fashion, right? So now the next section was related to the Cortana side, right? So enabling Cortana and Power BI. So I've only got this one open. I'm going to close this one back down because my Power BI crashed earlier, right? So I'm going to open up a different one for the Cortana side. So this will take just a little bit. While this is enabling, so I'm going to go ahead and open up the link to this too, because there's a few steps to enable this for your organization, and adding something outside of that organization as well. So I just need to edit the hyperlink to make this easier on me. Didn't mean to click on Marketplace. It's not of any help. So this is the walkthrough. Again, it's a part of the PowerPoint to enable the Cortana type. Again, we're talking about when I click here and type a question, the Cortana type of data sets and like what we want to have take place. Again, this will walk you through how to use it, how to enable it. Again, we've already clicked on this for this data set for the settings, so we allowed that. There's a few caveats you need to be aware of. And then this is the part that takes a little bit to sync up. So adding Power BI credentials to Windows to make this work, that takes a little while. It could take a day for it to sync up possibly. Sometimes I've seen that. So in this with the Cortana, so this is a different type of dashboard that we've got. This is kind of out of the box demoware that we use. That's part of our offering. But we have this monthly performance kind of starts with legal entities and revenue and expenses, and by a few different financial dimensions. Well, when you're telling these type of stories that drill in across several different tabs, possibly for a specific role, the whole point of a Cortana design report, right, is to be able to have something that is very specific. You can't answer everything. You can answer a part of a question, and then it can take you to that report and be able to then have greater insights at that point. So notice this is from our first tab, actually, our monthly performance by legal entity. So revenue by legal entity, and then by 2 financial dimensions. Those 3 visuals were you selected in order to tell a starting of answering a question that someone could click on if it wasn't enough to dig into, and it would drive them into this larger report. Now, in creating these, I'm just going to show you real quick. So I just added quickly, clicked on the plus, a new page. Now from this, I'm on the page settings, right? So I got to go here to these settings, and you'll see here the page size. So the page size top, this is what's important to get you started. You have to have this Cortana enabled. So here the Cortana is enabled, right? The other thing, so you have to do is we have to turn on Q&A here. So the Q&A has to be turned on in order to enable this for Cortana. And then this is where we can get into some of these alternate naming. So again, this is why I start with your questions. And now we have visuals and steps that we can do in the Power BI creation process for telling insights with ask a question. And even being able to say, this is related to, revenue, legal entity, expense, business unit, COGS. So I'm just adding a few things here, right? And I can also, add more details as well. Commas obviously separate this stuff. And obviously name this. This would be named different. This is, I can't type fast enough for it to auto-correct me. Something like that, right? And so then you can get into the design experience. Obviously, I'm just going to copy and paste really quick because the purpose of this is how to enable it, not so much creating these visuals. These are standard visuals, by the way. One caveat for a lot of these services is that standard visuals have to be used in some of these things when they surface it. So obviously, it's going to come when all visuals will be supported, but some of the non-standard visuals that you get out of the store will not surface well here. So just keep that in mind. And just again, another review of this, right? For this data set we're building related to this page size has to be Cortana. Page information, we have to turn Q&A on, give it a valid name, and we're giving some hints. So when somebody's talking about revenue, legal entity, those would be the hits that would make this show up. Now, I'm not going to be able to do that in this webinar to be able to show you this as far as actually pop up. But once this is published, and then you walk through the steps of enabling your Windows 10 for Cortana, again, another section of this whole adding conversation, right? And these are the next steps that when you get out of just, the basics of Power BI, and you get into more advanced data storytelling, if you can center around these questions, then you can do all kinds of things outwardly from it. Now, there'll probably be some questions about hey, these are a lot of areas to manage this type of meta information, right? Questions about this data set. And then when we have questions we want to suggest in the Q&A about the data set in the Power BI service. And I can tell you, yes, you're right. That is, a management aspect. So, the best way to do that is typically outside, have some kind of BI Center of Excellence, at least an Excel sheet, God forbid. Right, but at least an Excel sheet that has role in question, and then you can start relating. You start creating this meta catalog. Now we use Azure Data Catalog. I'll say that one more time: Azure Data Catalog, to help with as a starting point with metadata management. But it's just a management kind of portal. You still have to apply these things in these areas right now. All right, talked a lot. We're getting close to the end a little bit here. Another thing I wanted to talk through is looking at the Power KPI matrix with this session. So this is a new visual that recently came out is version 2, which had a lot of updates from Microsoft. If you're not familiar with the Power KPI visual, you should be. It's a very responsive design. But this is actually the matrix. And so I'm going to show you an example of how we did like scorecarding or balanced scorecarding kind of concepts in the past with, when Power BI kind of really came out and using the out-of-the-box type of visuals versus now using something like the Power KPI matrix and making sure you're aware of it so that for the data storytelling, when you have the correct data to make it show up. This is very powerful. And so I'm just using, this is still loading, by the way. So, but I'm just using the out-of-the-box standard with this because they have it built really well to be able to walk through the story that you can make. Now, I'll show you some of the data with this, and you can see it's really important. So you can go get this from App Source. You can actually go and click Import from Marketplace and go and download the Power KPI Matrix visual. So you can just type Power. And you can see Power KPI, which you should have, and then Power KPI Matrix, which is a series of these mixed with being able to tell a balanced scorecard. So what you have, again, this is column-based data model. It shows you real quick. These are the columns, rows, step by step. So this will walk you through with being able to tie it to your data. Very, very handy on how to do that. A couple of categories. So if I look at this, you can see when I look at the setup as far as the fields of the values, then the comparison values, the indicators, the second comparisons, and then if you look at categories, any imaging, any sorting order and hyperlink, there's a lot to fill out here. So, but you can get started with, typically when you've got actual versus budget for a specific financial dimension in one category. This just show multiple categories and stepping down. You can include links, so that's a part of the hyperlink stuff. And then when we look at this, obviously, these are spark lines. So again, if you're used to balanced scorecard, the whole point of that is to be able to point out the problem areas you need to focus on typically. And what's great about this new release is this pop-out. And the pop-out works on mobile. So that's the other thing to keep in mind, that what's great about these Power KPI and Power KPI Matrix visuals is they're responsive in nature, meaning that they have a responsive design that works well for both web, as well as the mobile side of things. So in looking at this, I clicked on a specific KPI just to get the details as far as within the data and how the variances are showing why this is negative 27% with that KPI status as far as the details related to this. And obviously I can tie that to a different visual, but when you look at this, again, you can see as far as the usefulness of this and then how you can use this across multiple different ways. But I wanted at least highlight this before we got into the questions. We got 15 minutes left now, so I want to get into the questions and make this more ad hoc at this point. Again, resource, we're walking you through this. If you're doing any kind of scorecarding, I wanted to show you how we used to do this. So how we used to do this in our scorecarding, let me show you an example of, if I can read, there we go. Again, I had this up and everything crashed on me, so thanks for bearing with me. This is kind of an attempt of a balanced scorecard with specific KPIs with just out of the box visuals, right? We can tell a better story and get a lot more as far as real estate and have that responsive design with this new type of visual that you see here. And notice that it's collapsed into if we see. This is the responsive design concept I was talking about. See how the KPI in the middle is changing based on the size? That's why it works well in mobile. And that's why, so depending on the size that it has, obviously this type of visual would take up almost the entire page of what you're designing because you're trying to tell a very detailed story. But I wanted to at least show this from a scorecarding perspective that you should be targeting this along with Power KPI visual to be able to help tell responsive stories that work well on the web and mobile, as well as just these are the more advanced stories you're going to get into. All right, so I've talked through a lot, and we had a few issues with some of the demos. That's typical, honestly. So with that, can we turn it over now to where we have enough time for questions?
Thank you, Brandon. That was great.
Hopefully I recovered well.
No, you did great. I think that it all seemed to still, come together really nicely. So we do have one question here to get us started. All this sounds great. So when you look at the define phase and lining up questions and roles, how do you really get started with everything? It's always they don't know what they know or what they don't know.
Yeah, that's always the question, right? Well, so they don't know what they don't know. So you go in, it's like, no, I still got these 704 Excel reports. That's what I need, and that's the mindset, right? I'll be honest, like you have to sit down and break it down and say, we're not going to try to do all finance, production, sales, and everything in the next 18 months, and one day you'll get something, right? That's a failed approach. You have to be able to get someone to agree, hey, we're going to focus on sales first, or finance, or production. Those are kind of the three major areas of a company we work with that we'll start with. And I say sales, that means maybe marketing and sales as well. But say sales, you focus in on that, and you have to come in with like some known, like give examples, right? So, like what are my top 10 customers? Look at what you can already answer questions for now in sales. Take the top 10 of those Excel reports that they mostly use daily and help them derive the 3 top questions out of that. And that'll get that process mentality going. And then what usually happens is you usually see about 20 to 30 questions. There's a meeting, kind of decision by committee typically. And here's my top 20 questions. Okay, then agree we're only going to do top 5. We're only going to do the top 5 questions. We're going to get that up and running. We're going to get that up and running to work in your workflow because half your team's mobile. So there's a mobile Power BI aspect to it. Half your team is going to be in Excel for whatever reason. The other half is going to be really published to the web and embedded into Dynamics. So those are real scenarios and different workflows that you have to consider when you're telling those stories, how they roll up with each other. And that's why you need to start, hey, focus on the first 5, get that proved out, get that up and running, iterate from there. And that usually, in our experience, helps them get past that mentality of, I got 706 Excel reports, I need 706 Excel reports tomorrow.
Yeah, great, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments from anyone for Brandon?
Well, either everybody enjoyed it or it's lunchtime for everybody.
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I'm sure, as you were saying with your last response on that question, that really probably helps buy in with getting more trust and it more adapted throughout the business as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it builds upon each other, right? I mean, a lot of times in this, like I'll be asked to, go back to that slide, honestly, and spend time on again, you break this apart, right? But you're right, because what you do is you're helping people advance, right? Most people want to say, oh, I want to get into that predictive side of things. I want to predict my customer churn. It's like, well, but do you trust the current data scenario with answering your current day, like what happened today for your customer?
Right.
Well, really, no, not really. And it's like, well, okay, we got to start there, and then we can lead into that next step. But you're exactly right. It builds momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just changes. Like every 6 months, there's a new set of questions.
Right. What you were asking 6 months prior has evolved.
Exactly. So you have to have an adaptive framework that's agile, iterative, and collaborative that really focuses on the storytelling aspect of it.
That's great. And your first of the series for these 3, that's also available out in the PUG library as well for others who are interested.
That's right. Yeah, going over the basics. We really spent more time on that and then taking examples of how to make that happen in the basics. Like how to apply this approach and spending more time in the, the data storytelling basics, right? So starting from in Power BI, creating reports and those data sets and relationships, and then getting more into the, what we reviewed for part 1 with drill through capability, what if, and then it just kind of builds into what we did today.
Right. Well, I want to, if there's no additional questions right now, hopefully we can ask Brandon to, maybe stay tuned into the PUG Exchange, and if people have questions, they can go ahead and continue to post them there, and we can route them back to you if you miss them at all, and make sure people get their any other questions answered as well. I've posted that in the chat as well for everyone if they need access.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, again, thanks everybody for your time today. I know everybody's time is valuable. Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Gina. So hopefully we'll
Thank
have
you.
continued sessions from here. So
Sounds wonderful. Thanks so much.
thanks. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.